Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining today. I'm Rod Crandall. You've got George Steele probably in the box below me. It's named Nathan Berglund, who runs USAdvisors, but that is George. He is very likely the person that you've been communicating with on our team, and certainly you can work with George or myself. For all intents and purposes, we are exactly your success team. Generally speaking, to the extent that you want help at a point of sale basis, or if you want help with business planning, specifically to try to incorporate more insurance planning into your practice, then you would generally work with me. To the extent that you need help on a case, you need to. Oh, Nancy has been silenced. Well, I certainly didn't mean to silence her. Let me see. I don't know why you're silenced. I don't see that you're muted. Now you're muted, but I'm going to unmute you. So maybe now. Nancy didn't mean to silence you, by the way. So in any event, to the extent that you're not quite sure what you need or you want some help integrating insurance, I think I would generally be your main contact. To the extent you have a live case and you have a good sense of what you need, but you just need direction on the best company, the best design. George is all over that. He certainly understands very well what's available in the marketplace and does a great job sorting through our carriers, even if we have health concerns and the like, to really make sure we get the best outcomes for our clients. So again, appreciate you joining in. This is a monthly coaching call. The topic this month is on the Section 7702 Christmas Miracle. I'm going to share with you what that means. I have not been this excited about an insurance change, maybe ever, to be honest. George, do you see my screen real well? You want to give me a thumbs up? Beautiful. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. Talk about what we're going to talk about, then we'll talk about what we talk about, and then we'll tell you what we talked about, right? Isn't that how these things go? So we're going to cover, what happened in Congress in December that made this change. Okay, and then more importantly, what impact do those changes have on insurance products and designs? And then what companies do we have or will we have that have already adopted these types of changes? So we're really going to go through that today, and then we're going to actually give you a case study that shows you a case designed for accumulation before this change and after this change so that you can see how dramatic that change was. Then we'll talk a little bit about who is the ideal client for an accumulation type structure using IUL in my example. And then how do we best position that opportunity? So as you know, it's not what insurance is, it's what insurance does. And words really do matter, and it does matter how we position the concepts and the solutions that we might bring to a client. And so it's my intention to hopefully walk you through what's changed, what does that mean, give you a case study, give you some ideas on how you can open up some conversations here. We're moving into the fourth quarter, which historically is always the best quarter for insurance. We always slow down a little bit in the summer because everyone's out doing their thing. And kids go back to school. I know by me, kids were in school the last couple of days as they've kind of started back. I'm sure by you, it's something similar. We always see a big pickup from Labor Day till about the middle of November. And really, that's how we can finish the year strongly. So it is not too late to have your best year in insurance. And especially these types of strategies, if you just have a couple of these strategies, you might be surprised what occurs. Just before the call started, I was going to mention to George on my team that I just put together an IUL contract just before these changes came into play. So I got the old rules. It's still going to work out well for me, but I actually missed the new 7702 rules. And so that is what it is, timing being what timing is. All right, so let's take a peek here. So the IRS code 7702 is effectively the tax code that allows for life insurance to accrue on a tax deferred and ultimately tax-free basis and distribute out on a tax-free basis. And one of the changes that they made is they used to require insurance companies to hard code their guarantees, assuming a 4% return minimum inside of their general accounts. And as many of you might be aware, general accounts have taken a little bit of a beating over the last even 20 years, right? And with low interest rates the way they are in a prolonged low interest rate environment, likely, they gave the insurance companies a little reprieve and allowed them to use a 2% rate instead of a 4% rate here in 2021. And then they're allowing for some sort of floating rate thereafter. So it might bounce around a little bit. But nonetheless, what this has done is it's created a lot of breathing room for insurance. And the net result is that it's become really great news, in particular for designs that are used for accumulation purposes. And so what that really means is that we can put much more inside of a contract before it becomes a modified endowment contract than we could before. And in fact, in some cases, you can get up to 300% more premium in. This is really amazing. And if you understand about how to overfund an insurance policy, the reason that people do that is because the underlying cost of insurance is effectively static. So the cost of insurance is going to be what the cost of insurance is. But to the extent that we can put additional dollars into the account, then those dollars can effectively fall into the cash value account and earn interest. And so by being able to put more money in than we could before, what we effectively do is we have a lower net amount at risk. So a net amount at risk is the difference between the death benefit and the cash value. And that's the difference by which the insurance companies assess their cost per thousand charges. And so at the end of the day, we're going to have to buy less death benefit than we needed to before in these designs, and because of which our internal rates of return are much higher, and in some cases shockingly higher. And I want to show you that because it's pretty amazing. So here's a nice graphic that Prudential put together. It said, well, how much more premium can we put together? So these are policy issue age of 0, right? That's a baby. Well, look, a baby right now can put in 300% more than they could before. Now, listen, the baby doesn't put the money in, right? But a lot of clients will put insurance on their children, not only for the purpose of accumulating wealth for them, but also they might have riders that allow them to buy additional amounts of insurance in the future without evidence of insurability. What I found is that they haven't accumulated very well because we can't really put much money in, because at 0, your life expectancy is like 86 years or something. Well, with these new rules, we can put in 300 times more than we had before. So you may want to give that a little bit of thought for some of your clients that want to insure their kids. These accumulation strategies can look a lot better because we can put so much more in. Now, as you can see, the older we get, the less of the increase that we can get additional dollars in. Most of the people that do the strategy that I'm talking about are probably somewhere between 35 and 50. And so in that case, we're really looking at somewhere between 75 and 150% more premium than we could do before. And that's just really exciting because that allows, again, our net internal rates of return to be much higher. And so when you pair that with what's happening with taxes, I mean, do any of you know what's happening with taxes? I don't, but I know what they're talking about. They're talking about increasing taxes many, many ways. You can see up on the screen. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that we're going to have increased marginal tax brackets. I think that's, in my opinion, a given. I also believe that it's a given that we're going to get decreased estate tax exemptions. I personally think that those two things will absolutely happen. I don't know. But what about increased capital gains taxes? What if they eliminate the step up? That one would really be problematic, in my opinion, for many, many clients, especially those that aren't of extremely high wealth, right? Elimination of step up could cause some problems. What about capping itemized deductions, expanding Social Security tax, increased corporate income taxes? See, at the end of the day, when we're utilizing life insurance as an accumulation tool, oftentimes what we're really trading off is the cost of taxes versus the cost of insurance. And what I'm relaying to you today, and part of why I'm so excited about this strategy, is that the cost of insurance are coming down and the cost of taxes are going up. And that's not a good scenario if you're paying taxes, but it is a very good scenario if you're considering using life insurance as an alternative accumulation tool, which allows for growth to happen on a non-taxable basis, and we can take withdrawals on a tax-free basis through policy loans and withdrawing our basis. And so in my opinion, from an accumulation standpoint, in the 20 years I've been in business, or 21 years, this is the best time that I've ever seen to make the case that your client ought to really consider utilizing a maximum funded insurance contract for accumulation purposes if they're the right kind of client. That right kind of client is generally maxing out their qualified plans, not funding a Roth IRA due to income limitations, or maybe they've maxed out their Roth IRA and would like to put more in. Maybe you're doing backdoor Roth conversions for them. But the fact is there's very limited tax-free buckets, as you're aware. right? And so this is a bucket that often gets ignored because it's the life insurance bucket and it's, quote, too expensive. Well, I've got to tell you, for the right client with the right time frame, I don't believe it's too expensive, and it just got better. So I'm going to show you that in a minute. So what about carriers that are currently on board? We know American National, Nationwide, Prudential, Securian, and Symetra. Actually, North American is on board now as well, and everyone's going to need to be on board by next year. So those that aren't already offering these products, they will be offering these products. And so we're going to really see, and we're still learning, what are these products really going to look like. Okay. I'll tell you that the example I'm going to give you is the Symetra product. The Symetra product was the first into the marketplace, and it really, really looks great, and I do like that. We're going to see where these others come in. As you know, we're a brokerage firm, so while we have favorite companies in sort of class, if you will, depending on what we're trying to accomplish, we're not married to any of these companies. And by the way, they leapfrog each other. So it just depends where we are sort of in the market cycle and where we are in each of these business cycles for these insurance companies relative to who we like for what. And by the way, that's back to a lot of what we count on guys like George on my team to do, because they are paying close attention to all of the product changes. And oftentimes, I personally may not know exactly what the marketplace looks like because I'm focusing all my time at client focused. So I'm meeting with clients and I'm meeting with advisors. And George is really the conduit between the insurance companies and us. And so when we've got a guy and we've got a gal, then we go to George and he can bring forth, again, kind of the best in breed. So some of the other things that we've been thinking about here are, will they let us make changes on policies that are already in place? I'm getting the sense that we're not going to be able to do that, but I wouldn't be shocked if a carrier or two from a competitive standpoint allowed us to do that. Sure would be nice for like I told you, I put one in place for myself before the new rules. Sure would be nice if Allianz, where I placed my IUL, if they allowed me to contribute more. If they allowed me to do that, I would actually do that. But the question is, will they allow us to do that? I don't know. Will existing policies be able to decrease a face amount? Instead of putting more money in, will they let me drop down a face amount? Okay, the answer to that is maybe. Now, if we're out of a surrender charge, we can probably already do that, but those old policies are running on the old rules, and that's the real question, is will they apply the new rules to the old products? And that's still sort of up for grabs. The question of what will happen to commissions, I think we're seeing that. The commissions have gone down, right? Because effectively, a target premium is based upon the death benefit that's put in place. And so if we're buying less death benefit per premium contribution, let's say we're putting $10,000 a year away, and we used to buy $400,000 of death benefit, but now we buy $300,000 of death benefit. In that case, our face amount came down by 25%, which means that our target premium came down by 25%, which means that our commission came down by 25%, but the client ends up with a much more efficient contract. So it's still a little bit unclear because, again, all the carriers haven't come into the market on what they're doing here. But I think it's pretty clear that the commissions are probably down 25 to 35% on average. And on its face, that's not great. However, it is great because the strategy got a lot better. And so I'm personally choosing to say, listen, I'll take that decrease because I believe there's many more people that ought to consider this that haven't considered it before. And that's why I'm telling everybody who will listen why I believe this was a Christmas miracle, because this was passed in December at kind of the last minute. And people didn't even really know about it, even in the insurance industry, until I want to say middle of January or even February, before our carriers and our partners and our experts sort of brought this to our attention. They go, wow, look at what was here. Okay. And then will companies use this as a time to increase profit? And I think the answer to that is yes. And I think we're seeing that a little bit. Insurance companies have had kind of a hard time lately because primarily of the low interest rate environment and the volatility in the stock market. So those two things have made it very difficult for insurance companies to maintain the profitability that they've had in the past. And so with this kind of change, in my personal opinion, it gives them a little bit of cover, if you will, in their new product design to be able to maybe make a little less competitive of a product than they could have. Now, I don't know that, but we'll see. And again, that's a big reason why we are independent, because we're going to go to the market and whatever is best for our clients is what we're going to be using. And by the way, it's really good for our clients to have an open market because it keeps these insurance companies more honest, if you will, because they know that we have access to 12 other companies that have a good product. So they have to make their case for why you would use theirs. So I think they're going to take some profit, in my opinion, but I don't think it's going to be egregious. Okay. So let's show you what I'm talking about here. Okay. So these were real numbers, again, with Symetra, with a 53-year-old female. This was the old 7702 numbers, and this was the new 7702 numbers. Now, by the way, when they made this change, they also reduced a cap. So the old S&P cap, so that's the S&P 500 cap where the money is invested. The old cap allowed you to operate between 0 and 9.5%. The new cap was 0 and 9%. Okay? So when we illustrated the case in the past, we had an assumed rate of 5.92% because that was kind of the look back number based on a 9.5% cap. In the new product, we could show 5.7. So right away, we were illustrating, 22 basis points less in the new product. Okay? What we solved for was a 10-pay premium of $50,000 per year. So that's $50,000 a year times 10 years, repositioning $500,000. Okay, we're not paying $500,000 of premium. We're repositioning $500,000 into an asset class that has unique attributes, including the ability to have that money grow on a tax-deferred basis and ultimately be accessed on a tax-free basis. So here's where it gets good. The old rules for that amount of money for a 53-year-old female required us to buy a $1.2 million death benefit. That was the minimum death benefit the IRS allowed, or rather required, a $1.2 million death benefit to accommodate a $500,000 contribution over 10 years. Well, with the new rules, that number dropped down to $754,000. So that means the same amount of money going into a much smaller policy, and the net result is that we get better cash accumulation. So over 10 years, the death benefit in 10 years on the old product would be 1.4. We have 960 here. Again, that means we have less net amount at risk, which means less cost is coming out of this policy. Over 30 years, you see that the death benefit grew to be almost the same, which I thought was pretty interesting when you look at these two products. And again, this was Symetra. But here's the key. Look at over 10 years, we had much more cash value growth over 10 years, over 20 years, and over 30 years. And so here's the key. With this kind of structure, this lady thinks that she may want to access her cash somewhere between 20 years and 30 years from now. And so the 20-year internal rate of return on the cash value was 5.01%. What does this mean? This means that this assumes over 20 years that we put $50,000 in 10 times, and we earned 5.7% return every year. Now, of course, we know that we're not going to earn 5.7 every year. You're probably aware that every illustration is wrong once it's printed, but this assumes a 5.7% return every year, right? So 20 years out, she didn't get 5.7. She got 5.01. So what does that mean? That means that she's got 69 basis points worth of cost drag in her policy. So what does that mean? That means that the cost of insurance, all in, all the costs, including the commissions and everything else, just pulled forward 69 basis points from her policy. So effectively, she has a 5% internal rate of return on a tax-free basis. Now, by the way, that is way less than the anticipated cost of taxes when you consider what somebody has to pay in taxes in an alternative environment. And by the way, if she can wait 30 years, look at that number, 5.39%. That is crazy. Okay, that means that the cost of insurance all in that product is what? 30 basis points, right? 31 basis points. That is way cheaper than anything else, even a managed account, right? It's cheaper than almost anything, and everyone walks around thinking and saying that insurance is very expensive. And certainly in the early years, it certainly can be. I mean, I didn't show an internal rate of return over 10 years, but over 10 years, we put $500,000 in. We had $590,000 of cash value. That's probably maybe a 2% return, right? If it was a 2% return, then we have a cost drag of 3.7%. Well, 3.7% cost drag is high. But again, this strategy is a long-term strategy, not a short-term strategy. And we made sure that we tell all of our clients that this is not a great investment in the short term, but in the long term can be, and here's why. And these numbers, again, they just sort of blow my mind. Okay. So I'm going to take a quick pause and see if anybody has any initial questions or comments on this piece or anything that I've shared so far. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull over a taxable equivalent chart. Okay, so what we're looking at here, remember that was about a 5% tax-free return. So if you look at this chart and we have a 5% tax-free return right here, even in a 28% bracket, you need to get a 6.94% return to be able to pay taxes at 28% to yield a 5% return. Well, our drag was 69 basis points over 20 years. So that drag was lower than the cost of taxes. And by the way, I would ask you, what tax bracket is your client in or is going to be in, right? Our best clients are way over here, and they might be higher than 40% in the future, right? To get a 5% tax-free return, we'd need 8.47 to do that, okay? So what I hope that you'll see here is that by utilizing an index universal life contract, what we have is we have the ability to diversify away from the market by being in an indexed account. So when we inevitably have our next market correction and we're down 20 or 30%, which is effectively not an if, it's a when, right? When that happens, this type of contract will very likely yield zero for that year instead of taking the loss. And that zero is way better than taking a 20% loss. But what's better than taking that zero is the following year, we get any growth off of the floor. So we get to have growth off the low watermark. And so this helps protect us from some downside risk and then also creates the tax-free bucket that we may need. Let's take a look at some historical tax rates. Okay, I don't know if you've ever seen this. I'll make it a little bit bigger. So this is top federal income tax rates for regular income and capital gains since 1916. Okay, here's the top rate on regular income. Take a look after the war, 94% on any dollar above 200,000. Now, I recognize that was probably the equivalent of $1 million of income, but that's an effective tax bracket of 94%. I mean, holy cow. I do not believe that we'll ever get that high again, but take a look at some of these numbers. It came down into the 80s and then into the 70s. Look, it stayed in the 70% range for about 10 years at 200,000. Once again, that was probably 500 or 600,000. How many of your clients are earning 500 or 600,000? I'll bet you have a couple. Could you imagine if their marginal tax rate was 70%? If it was, would you more strongly consider this type of strategy? I think so. Do I think we're going to see 70%? No, I really don't. But look, it came down to 50 and to 38. Well, look at what's happened here. We're in the 30s. So I would say, historically speaking, we're in a pretty low tax environment. And I don't know what taxes will be in the future, but I do believe they're going to be higher on average, especially with our best clients. And if they are, then we need to really consider what it means to utilize a strategy like this. Okay. And so who should we be talking to about this? So generally speaking, you're going to want to talk to people that are 25 to 60, have at least 7 to 10 years before distributions. And the longer that they need distributions, the better. This is one of those assets that if we can marinate for longer, it looks much better. So even for me, right, at 44, I have a couple of these, right? But if you can start these at 35 and 40 and 43, and you got that long time frame, you're going to shrink that cost down dramatically. And so really those people who have maxed out their qualified plans or cannot contribute to Roth IRAs are really the people that we need to be talking about this strategy with, okay? And then if we're going to talk to them, we have to figure out what are we going to talk to them about, right? As you can imagine, we don't go to the client and say, hey, you know what you should do? You should put $500,000 into an insurance contract and you're going to love it, right? I mean, we need the appropriate context. And so some of the ways that I talk about this are on the screen here, and these are true. The majority of Fortune 500 companies do utilize similar structures with their top level of executives to fund their non-qualified deferred compensation plans. Okay, if you didn't know that as an advisor, that's okay. You know why they use those plans? They use them really for two reasons. They use them for the reason that I just described to you, that we can get a lot of money in. In fact, there's no overall limit to the amount of money we can put in. It's only limited to our insurable interest. If somebody can qualify for $10 million of death benefit, for example, insurably, then we can stuff as much money in as the IRS allows us to for a $10 million policy. So the first of which is that this is one of the only places that you can put virtually unlimited amount of money in a tax advantaged place. The second reason is that these things are generally considered to be non-qualified plans instead of qualified plans, which means that these companies can pick and choose or even discriminate who they can offer these benefits to. So they'll just offer them to the executive team or a certain class, management or up. And by the way, you don't have to be in a huge company to utilize these. Sometimes they're utilized in small companies that may not have a retirement plan or may just have a simple plan and the owner would like to put a bunch more in but can't, right? And so we could set one up just for the owner and just for the owner's son, right? But not any of the other 12 people. So we can pick and choose who gets it. And there's no 59.5 rule either. Especially a lot of those corporate execs, they may want to retire early and they're going to have the majority of their wealth in qualified plans. Well, there's no 59.5 rule inside of these types of structures as well. So the fact is that big companies have been utilizing this strategy for a long, long time. And all we're really doing is we're using the same strategies that exist at the high corporate levels and we're bringing them down to our everyday clients, okay? And including physicians and others. So you might have some clients that have cash balance plans, for example. I love cash balance plans. I usually see them with physicians, and we can get up, as many of you are probably aware, to the 100,000 level or even beyond, where we can put $100,000 away on a tax-deductible basis. Isn't that wonderful? And the physician's really happy about that, but they want to put 150,000 away, but they can't because they're capped at 100. And so two comments there. If they want to put more in than the cash balance plan allows, we really need to consider that spillover, if you will, to be in this type of plan, right? Secondly, even though I do love those plans, and I know they're not going away, and I'd probably recommend them too, the fact is that do you really want to have that physician put $100,000 in pre-tax now and let that account grow so big and pay taxes later? I don't know. It's a real consideration, especially when you consider the Secure Act, right, which is requiring those large qualified balances to be paid down or rather be paid out within 10 years for a non-spousal beneficiary. So that's significant. Our best clients often have more wealth than they're going to spend, and then because of that, they're going to leave money to future generations. And leaving a qualified account has become probably the least effective account to leave for future generations, right? And it got worse. We used to be able to stretch that. Well, now it's over 10 years. If I inherit an IRA today, I'm not going to be upset about it, but that's going to be a poor asset for me to inherit because I've got to take the money at my top marginal tax bracket. And so I think the conventional wisdom to put as much money in a tax-deductible bucket as possible needs to be at least questioned. I'm not suggesting we should stop doing that. I actually don't think I would stop doing it, but I'd be thinking about it. And maybe I'd put $75,000 in that example. If he wanted to do 150, maybe I'd put 75,000 in the cash balance plan, and maybe I'd put 75,000 in this type of plan, right? Any of you who have heard me talk or even had me out with clients, you know that I don't really believe in selling insurance. I believe in selling consideration. And we need to have our clients really consider this. And in order to consider it, they have to be educated on it. And in order to be educated on it, they have to have a good conversation about it. And in order for them to have a good conversation about it, you probably need to bring that conversation to them. And that's a difficult thing to do because we're talking about insurance, and that can be difficult. So again, I would encourage you to think about what insurance does, not necessarily what it is. And I would also encourage you that if you like this kind of concept, but you feel a little bit uncomfortable, maybe that's the perfect opportunity for you to reach out to me, and maybe I can help you. I can either help coach you up on the back end and kind of, send you out. Or if you'd like, you can say, hey, I've got a partner on my team who's a specialist in this area. I asked him to be on our next call. I do a number of calls and Zooms nowadays. I can certainly meet in person. I am in the Chicagoland area, but generally speaking, Zoom has been very effective and efficient, especially if you're working with your client and you already have a high trust relationship. Sometimes bringing in the expert can really elevate the importance of that matter. It can psychologically put you on the same side of the table with your client. And I've had a lot of great success doing joint work with wealth advisors over the last 16 years, which is the primary way by which I make my living. And so I've done joint work with over 200 advisors. We generally have a 70 or 80% implementation rate when we get the opportunity to meet directly with clients. I think that that's really because of the high trust relationship that they have with you, the financial planning context, and then understanding that this is just maybe a sleeve of that, right? Some other language, again, that you're seeing on the screen here is that 99% of the most successful people out there are not even aware that this type of strategy exists. And that's, again, a lot because people are just running away or hiding from insurance, and I certainly understand that. So most people are not aware that this exists. So one of the things I do like to ask is, how much of your retirement income is going to be in a tax-favored position, right? And the answer for our best clients is usually very little, right? And so if that's the case, well, should we consider this kind of bucket? I really believe, even as biased as I am, that if we really consider this, what often happens if they understand it, and if they understand it, then it's not should I or should I not have this type of vehicle, but how much of this vehicle should I have? And that's where we talk about marrying these structures. So the average insurance person will bring to your attention that that $50,000 annual premium for 10 years is not required. And it absolutely is not required. We're allowed to put that much money in. We don't have to put anywhere near that much money in. But if we don't put that much money in that contract, our performance is going to lag. And our cost is going to increase and our net return is going to decrease. And so I talk to people about segmenting enough cash to be able to marry a plan and not overcommit, because there are some trade-offs for using insurance, right? I mean, including the fact that they have to qualify. And in fact, that's part of what you'll find if you start having these conversations is you'll get things like, well, wait a minute, how could that even be? That's like too good to be true. Well, it's not too good to be true. Part of it is that you have to qualify for it. And qualification in life insurance isn't a strictly pass or fail, it's a pass and slot. And so you get slotted into various underwriting classes, and every time you get slotted lower, your cost goes up. When your cost goes up, your net internal rate of return goes down, right? And so we need to be in good health, which also then speaks to, this is why we need to be thinking about our younger successful clients, because they're going to be best positioned for this, because they're going to have the duration, the amount of time that they can sit and let this asset mature. And they're also on average going to have better health so that our costs can be lower, right? One of my favorite questions is if you could fund your 401k or your IRA or whatever that is with more money, would you do so? Okay. I believe there's a lot of money in non-qualified annuities and in brokerage accounts that should be in life insurance contracts. Okay. If that one came at you like real hard because you have those, I think that the easy thing to do with respect is to open up a brokerage account. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have brokerage accounts, and I'm not saying that I don't believe in brokerage accounts. I have one, I believe in them. But I believe that a lot of the money in there ought to be in a contract like this, or at least should be considered to be in a contract like this. And at the end of the day, what we're really seeing here is this isn't just off-the-shelf stuff. This is a specially designed insurance policy that is designed specifically to be an effective accumulation tool. So it's specially designed. Okay, what I've witnessed in my 21 years of business is I've seen a lot of what I call commission maximization strategies out there, where agents are trying to find out ways to increase their commission. And I've seen it a lot, and you probably have too. Well, this is a commission minimization. Not only are we putting the maximum allowable, but with this new change, commissions came down even further. And so when you think about it, you've got only so much money, and the insurance company needs to make money, the client needs to make money, and they need to pay the producer, right? And at the end of the day, there's one pile to do these three things. Well, guess what? The insurance company is going to get theirs. And in fact, they need to get theirs. We want them to get theirs, because if we don't believe in our insurance company, and if they're not very strong and vibrant and have a ton of reserves so that they can fulfill the promises they make to us, we might as well not have any insurance at all. So on the one hand, we don't want insurance companies to take advantage of us. We don't like the charges that they charge us, even me, but we need them to be profitable. We want them to be profitable. Then that just leaves the client and us. And so if we routinely dial down our commissions, which we do routinely, commission minimization strategies, then that minimization ends up in the account value of our clients. And so that's where it becomes a very, very important strategy that, again, has made me very excited because it's gotten better. So let's take a look at a term insurance chart, right? And I guess I should have done this earlier, just for basic sake. And I definitely share this with clients, because when you really get into this and you get somebody who understands this and you pull out a 40-page illustration, that's when things can go awry. Now, you have to pull out that 40-page illustration and you have to show them that. But you definitely want to show them something like this first, and you want to walk them through, what are we even dealing with here? And so what this is a graph of term insurance and permanent insurance. And it's a generic graph. This is dollars, so it costs more here. And this is age, and this is how old we are on this axis. So down here you have this cost of insurance. That's what I'm describing when I talk about that net amount at risk. So the cost of insurance when we're young and healthy is very inexpensive, but it gets more and more expensive every year and really goes off the chart. This is where you see 20-year term policies that come out of rate lock and they go into annual renewable term. And then you see this huge jump in premium. That's because they're going into this pure cost of insurance that they call annual renewable term. The cheapest way to buy insurance this year is to buy annual renewable term. But it's the most ineffective way over time, because the prices just keep escalating. So most of what happens out in the industry, and frankly, most of what clients need, in my opinion, is term insurance. And they buy 10-year term policies, they buy 20-year term policies, and they buy 30-year term policies, right? Sometimes 25 years, sometimes 15. But what's happening there is they're averaging these increased costs over a finite period of time, for 10 years, averaging for 20 years, or averaging for 30 years. This X represents the rate lock is gone. Well, when the rate lock is gone, what happens? We jump up here to the annual renewable term. So I think most of the country is very well served with term insurance, right? But our best clients have need for permanent insurance for legacy purposes and for accumulation purposes, because once taxes start becoming the biggest cost or expense of our clients, that's really where permanent insurance kicks in. So you move up into guaranteed universal life. I like to call that lifetime term insurance. So that might be guaranteed out to age 90 or 100 or 120. So it's the same scenario where it's effectively term insurance. It's not technically term insurance, but it effectively is, where we're paying the least amount of money for the biggest death benefit over a finite period of time, right? Well, then we move up here to VUL and IUL, right? And this is the MEC line according to the IRS code 7702. And so what happens is they've got this line effectively. I have a dotted line, and if you go below it, it's a non-MEC, but if you put $1 too much, you become a MEC, and then you ruin all of the advantages that I just described. Not all of them. You still get tax deferral, but now when you take money out of it, it's taxed like an annuity, and you have to take your gain first. And so it ruins the reason for putting the insurance umbrella on top of it to begin with, right? And so what this sheet does not show is that the new MEC line would be up here. So the new MEC line would be up here. And the real key is that every dollar above this line of cost of insurance effectively goes into the cash value account, right? And that's why the more money we can put in, the better, because the cost is going to be what the cost is. We want the remainderment dropping into the cash value. And then if we're in a fixed account like a whole life or a universal life, we might be earning 3 or 4% on those dollars. If we're in an indexed account, we might earn 4 to 6%, knowing that we have a 9% cap. There will be years, absolutely, that an IUL will earn 9%. That's a fixed account, by the way. I want to remind you that an IUL is a fixed It's fixed business. So you have a fixed account that can and will earn 9% in a year. Now understand that that 9%, of course, is a gross return, not a net return, because they have to pull out the costs. But then also understand there will absolutely be years where that will credit zero and it's going to bounce around. And when we do the back testing, it's generally between 4 and 6%. And that's my comment to you about diversifying away from the market and diversifying away from taxes. And so I like the index bucket quite a bit because the people that are most appropriate for this strategy usually have high equity exposure and high tax exposure. And once again, we're diversifying away from the market and diversifying away from taxation. And it can be done in a variable account, right? To the extent that you want to take additional risk, we can certainly do that as well. So I think of those as like the engines that run this. So conceptually, we can create this beautiful vehicle that creates this supplemental tax-free income, and then we get to decide what engine or gasoline we want to run the vehicle on, right? So I'm relatively agnostic, although I do favor index accounts for the reasons that I just described. Questions or comments? Anybody out there have any questions? If you do, just go ahead and unmute yourself and just step right forward. All right. So.
Hey, Rod.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brett. How you doing, bud?
Good. How you guys doing today?
Living a dream, my friend.
Great. I have a question. Like, if you have somebody that's, say they've got an old VUL,
yep.
Where the thought process was to overfund it, but then couldn't really overfund it because of the MEC rules. Yep. But you've got some cash value.
Yep.
Be a good case to look at doing some kind of exchange if there's good insurability.
Correct. What I would say is absolutely it's a case that we should consider exchanging. Whether or not it makes sense to exchange would be a different story. So okay. What we would ultimately do is we'd conduct a review. So the first thing you would want to do is get an in-force illustration from the existing VUL. And in fact, you might want to get two different illustrations or maybe even three. Okay. So the first would be, how is it performing right now? Whatever the client is currently funding, let's see how that performs. And then you're going to want to give them an interest rate, maybe a 7% return. I don't know. I would leave that to you, but that seems reasonable to me when I run these things. Then I would also ask them to assume a maximum contribution level. So how much could we put in? Okay, so here's what we're currently doing. Here's the maximum that we could do. So I would send out those requests to the current VUL carrier. Then at the same time, or in the near same time, I would be asking the client, again, what does their health look like, and is there any concerns that they're aware of? And then in the meantime, while you're getting those, you should reach out to George, and we'll then take that 1035 and see what these new products will do. And then you can compare the old product to the new product, and then that's how you can determine whether or not it might make sense for you to 1035. And what I found is your client will love that conversation because they probably don't understand that much about what their VUL is, in my experience, anecdotally. And just reviewing that again will be very helpful. And then if you can tell them that you can improve their position, that could be really good. Now, you get new surrender charges as well. So again, I'm not saying that it's appropriate to do that, but I am saying it's appropriate to consider doing so. And George and I were recently involved in taking an Ameriprise VUL with $500,000 in it, and we 1035'd it into an IUL contract. The client is tickled pink, and he's not paying any more premiums either.
Wow.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. It's giving me stuff to think about.
Good. Good. Who else? Anybody else have a comment or a question? So I would say reach out to me or George on your next case. Even reach out to us if you want to consider whether this is right for you, right? Because again, this strategy, I mean, it's just really good. I can't believe how low that cost is. You know, we do these Coaches Corners every month. Our next one is scheduled for September 16th. We have been sending you out Always Be Learning emails through Jeff on the second and fourth Thursday. I think we've shared with you in the past that we do have an advisor toolbox that kind of houses all of our best stuff, including the recordings from these sessions. And, George and I really believe in the platinum rule, right? To the extent that we can understand and meet your needs, then ultimately our needs are met. And so we stand by hoping to help you serve your clients better. You see on the screen here George's contact information, and then my contact information just below. So we'd be ready, willing, and able to help you. Jeff, any last comments from you?
No, Rod, very good. Love the concept. Looking forward to testing it out a little bit.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, you know how to find us, my friend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I loved it under the old rules. So
Yep.
Looking forward to testing out the new engine a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right? I mean, 50 basis point drag or lower. I mean, even 1%, in my opinion, a 1% drag is completely acceptable. Completely. For 1%, we effectively get the life insurance that we need. We get the tax deferral and the tax-free bucket that we have. And 1% is lower than what you guys are charging to manage money, right? And so this idea that insurance is too expensive, that's an old concept. Sometimes it can be, but not this strategy. This strategy is not too expensive if it's used right. And so I hope to implement it.
I'd like to just add one thing too, in terms of how you can scale this, because actually I worked with an advisor just last week with his daughter, 25 years old, and a friend, not fiance yet, but anyway, two beginning career people who were starting to see some available cash, liquid cash for, and of course the initial investments, portfolios, Roth, but he really, when he looked at an illustration, in this case with North American, starting as low as a $50,000 death benefit, and time was on their side here, the software opened my eyes that with a moderate market return, retirement age, they were both pulling out on a loan basis over $6,000 tax-free, tax advantage. And I think it really excited him. And more importantly, it's another way to help a family member, which I'm sure he has in many investment ways up to this point. But this was just another piece to put in the toolbox.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that will move forward. North American illustrated very, very well in that example with the lower starting death benefit.
It's beautiful. Jeff, did we cut you off? Did you have something else to say?
No, a big thing there was just the tax deferral.
Yeah.
Because again, there's so few buckets to, get tax-free and tax deferred or tax advantaged money.
Yep.
And, we got to start taking advantage of every single one because, it's not going to get any better out there.
Yep. I mean, that's what we're saying here. So
if rates go up 2 or 3% or whatever, it doesn't matter what they go up, they're going up.
Yep.
We got to find the buckets, and it's,
yep.
We got people making more money, which makes it harder for them to put in Roth IRAs and do that type of stuff. So we got to be ready and able to help them sit there and go, hey, this is the only other place we can put money away and get you some tax advantaged potential at retirement.
Yep.
So beautiful.
Good. Well, you're speaking my language. When the taxes go up and the cost of insurance goes down, we need to consider this strategy. So you guys know where to find us, and we will catch you next month. And we appreciate your time and attention. And on behalf of me and George and all of USAdvisors, thank you so much, and make it a great day.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one.
Take care. Thank you, Nancy.